Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of the Blaze, and today I'm here with our Friday frontliner, Julie Klam. We are so excited to have you, Julie. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Freaking fabulous shoes. I've been sitting here admiring her hair, which is like Farrah hair. We need to, ask about like how you did this. Before I properly introduce Julie, I'm going to just say a couple of words about the Blaze. If you are a repeat Blaze watcher, welcome back. We always love having you. Thank you so much for always making it a party. If you're new to the Blaze, welcome. We are a team of 37 creative professional volunteers dedicated to connecting writers and readers in the age of COVID, in the age of Delta, in the age of whenever. We just audiences on our digital platforms. So thanks for joining us. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Instagram. We are ubiquitous. I think we're even on LinkedIn now. Like we are on it. We're everywhere. I know, right? LinkedIn, like we've conquered the world. And please consider signing up for our newsletter at www.mightyblaze.com so you can be kept apprised of all of our fabulous upcoming events, and you'll never have literary FOMO ever again. No FOMO. FOMO, very dangerous condition. Nobody likes it. And now that I have introduced the Blaze, Julie, I'm going to do your intro. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, buckle up. Julie Klam is the author of the New York Times best-selling You Had Me at Woof, Love at First Bark, Friend Keeping, Please Excuse My Daughter, and The Stars in Our Eyes. New York Times bestsellers, many. No stranger to New York Times bestseller landia. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, People Magazine, and other publications. And she lives in New York City with her family. So we are just thrilled to have you here today to talk about your new book, the almost legendary Memoirs Sisters, which, by the way, this is not the first question I usually ask, but this cover, like, I love it so much. Like, how do you feel about this cover? I loved it so much that when I was doing the promo for this, I made us into line drawings to try and look like this. So, please tell us about this and then tell us about the book.
Okay. So this is my 6th book with Riverhead Publishers. They have like an incredible design department, and every time I write a book, I think I have no idea what this cover could possibly be. I have no idea. What are they going to do? I don't know. And this one was specifically like, it just was, I couldn't imagine. And they sent it to me, and I was on like walking my dog and opened the email on my phone, and I was like, oh my God. And then, you always have to send it to like a few friends to say, what do you guys think of it? And then they go, oh my God. And then you say, okay, this is great. So I loved that it's different.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the cover. There's a photo behind.
Yes. You guys can see maybe on the edge there actually is, oops, I'm backwards, but there's like where's my finger? Nobody knows. Okay, so there's actually a photograph of the sisters, and then they made them into
right, and then they drew on top of them. Yeah, so and I liked it. I sort of thought they looked a little Maurice Sendak-ish, the drawings. But
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so the book is the plan was to write this book after my first book, which was a memoir, Please Excuse My Daughter. And I had this idea because I always heard these stories about my relatives that were my grandmother's cousins that were very interesting, quirky. In those days we were like, oh, the crazy, but now we know they are not. And they were, all I knew was that they were these 4 sisters who were millionaires and chain smokers, and they lived together, and they hated men. And then the story I heard a little bit later, which was that they came from Romania, turn of the century. Their dad was a photographer who wanted to be a movie director. So they were going to go out to Los Angeles, where he was going to be a movie director in the 1902. So it wasn't really like the big film business. And they were driving across country, and the mom went into labor in St. Louis, and then had a baby, died in childbirth. The kids went into an orphanage. Then the dad went out to LA and the kids stayed there. And one of them was very smart and good with numbers, and she got a job and that managed to pay their way out. And then they came to New York, and she was JP Morgan's, mistress, and decorated his house, and that every one of them had like this exotic thing, and she went to the White House, all of these things, and they lived. I mean, we knew they had zillions of dollars, and she was a commodity trader. But all of the stories that I decided to look into came up sort of like one by one to be not accurate, and in like a, I was wanting to write the story of them that I thought was the story of them, and it ended up turning into a book about how stories in families sort of devolve, and it's like a game of telephone, and so that was the whole impetus. I actually started writing a book with one thing in mind, and it turned into something totally different.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Thank you for that very concise description of a passion project. I feel that this book is. It must have been a little bit disconcerting to have it shapeshift on you. I was thinking while I was reading that usually when you're reading a story about a family story or a family secret that's revealed, it's a little bit flipped. It's like Dani Shapiro's Inheritance, where she finds out she's not who she thought she was, and her whole family is different. And this is like such an amazing equation that I've never seen before, where you've been told all of these stories, or you've sort of, I don't know how the audience thinks about their family stories, but you almost accrete them from the air around you. They get passed down in little bits and pieces, and then you alchemize them in your own imagination to, create these myths in your own head about these fantastic people. And then the Morris sisters is really about all of those stories like not being true. So the book becomes about excavation and how you get to those facts. And did you find that to be a deflating experience to go from being JP Morgan's mistress to not, or making $1 jillion to making $1 million? They still do extraordinary things.
I think that there was. I was not deflated. The times that I was deflated were the times that I was looking for a fact that I felt like it had to have been based on something, and I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't find anything. And then there's this term in genealogy, hitting a brick wall. And, I talk about that in the book, that like, I know, pre-internet times, there was, record keeping was a little scattershot. And so, even the birth certificates, which were just, somebody wrote in a book when this person was born, sometimes they got the date wrong. Like, when I wrote down the date today, it was the wrong date if that was on this birth certificate. And then you get a million different things, and it's like a game of telephone. And but I was always enjoying the process. I
was going to ask about that, because it is like putting a puzzle together. It's so, I was wondering if people in the audience as well, our beloved viewers, had done the sort of genealogical search that you did that is a little bit next level. Like you start out, you'd have this like fantastic quote on page 67. I had to do my dog ear, everything, but the experience of tracking down leads is like working for weeks and weeks to figure out how to get a locked door to open. You do everything you can, hanging and tinkering with the lock. And finally you pick up a key you never thought would work, and the door magically opens. And then you find there's a cement wall behind it. And I'm just wondering what sort of process that was like for you to keep picking at the lock and going to like sending so many emails to various experts, and going to St. Louis to see where the family lived, where the sisters lived, going to Romania. I mean, really going to like not just next level, but like upper tier research to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think either you can do that either if you're retired or if you're writing a book about it, because it's very hard to do that. And most people do their the genealogy is a hobby that they're doing a little bit all the time, and this was like concentrated over a few years. So I think I definitely had like moments where I was like, maybe this isn't a book. Maybe this isn't a book. Maybe I have not because when I was going to write it the first time, I actually withdrew my proposal and said, I don't even know where I would begin to find this. That was like
Wow. Okay.
15 years ago. I had a toddler, and there was no ancestry then. So there was a whole lot of things that made it just seem impossible. Then I wrote You Had Me at Woof, which was good for then. And then now, there was so much more information. I have a friend, Anne Leary, who's a fabulous writer.
I love Anne.
And yes, we love her.
We love Anne.
And she was like the Ancestry pro. So she and I would be on the phone, and I'd say, there's nothing there. And she's like, oh, but look, click here. And then I was like, and then you find things. And really, the finding of things is, you can get let down when you don't find things. When you do find things, it's like the most elation you could possibly imagine. It's like, this is my person, right here. That's their handwriting, and that's their, address. And so I just loved it.
I'm so glad. It feels a little bit like there's kinship with fiction, because so much of the time when I'm writing fiction, I think maybe this isn't actually a book. And when you sort of send your writerly filaments out into the universe, if they catch on a person who looks like your character or talks like your character, you find some bit. I do historical fiction, so when you find some piece of research that seems to flesh out your characters, it is so exciting. It makes them seem real, but these people actually were real. So you're meeting your relatives in real time for the first time. Can you talk about your childhood understanding of who the sisters were? Because I think so much of this is about longing and trying to, there's a panoply of characteristics that you share with them, and just a curiosity, but also a longing to know who they were, and as an adult to know that they had been okay as children. Can you talk a little bit about like how difficult their childhood actually was, and some of the stuff you found out?
It was extremely difficult. They had a very, very hard childhood. As a kid, like most kids, I looked at them as these kind of cranky old ladies, and who even, imagine that they were ever children, because that's not what kids think of. They think, oh, you popped into the world with gray hair and crankiness. So, and it wasn't until I was older and doing things on my own that I thought, these women did this incredibly difficult thing at a time. I mean, it's still incredibly difficult to be a woman and do the kinds of things that they did. And that suddenly it was a completely different, I had a totally different feeling about them. And, looking back to what they went through in their childhood, I was, as a human being and a mother, it broke my heart. They were orphaned. Their mother did not die in childbirth. Something else happened, and it was not good. And so their whole lives were a lot of hiding things from shame, and they really did a lot with nothing. I mean, when I went to Romania, I said to our guide, how would they have gotten to, they left, they came to Ellis Island. Their boat came from Southampton, England. And I said, how would they have gotten from this little town in Romania to Southampton? And he said, on foot, maybe a wagon, but mostly. And you're like, you think the things that I complain about doing, I had to walk 4 blocks in the heat and, get a cab.
Or go to Whole Foods. The lines are so long. You have to wear the mask. I mean,
I know. And you're thinking of these people who have their whole family, their whole lives, all their belongings in, their little, I have always imagined them with that bindle with the stick, a little polka dot handkerchief, and no money, and taking steerage, which is horrible. And they were actually in Romania more, well off than other people, because if you're really poor, you can't leave. I mean, you don't have, you can't get $50 together, So, so it was a lot of things about, and I think, writing this book during the whole, horrible Muslim ban and the refugee immigration situation, it really hit me what, how, just unbelievably difficult at any point it is to get up and go someplace else where you're thinking, you know, you're going to find a better life, and you do, or you don't. I mean, a lot of people, I live in New York City. I mean, a lot of people who've come here, you know, they were a doctor in Poland and now they're driving a cab. So, you know, there's a lot of heartbreak in that, but, and it's still happening. So.
Just the courage and the gumption it would take on the part of the adults. But the children did get that they had both their parents removed from their lives, I should say, without giving away any spoilers. And we think of childhood now in this era in our sort of helicopter era. I mean, I don't have children, you have children, but I know enough parents to know that you're so involved in your children's lives and feed them only probiotic. I mean, my niece is like, she eats only like this special organic, you know, whatever. And everybody is so careful. And then I contrast that with the childhood of the sisters of Marcella and Malvina and Selma and Ruth. And I just think, children were expected to be little adults in this sort of Dickensian model and to grow up so quickly. Do you think that bonded them more as sisters, and that's why they stuck together so much throughout their lives?
Yeah, I think that 3 of them were more bonded than the 4th one. There was the youngest one, who was born in St. Louis, was a little more like the American bohemian. She was like free love and very, you know, lived in the village and was a writer and went to cafes. The other ones were more, you know, sort of straight, and they were tighter, but they were all, you know, they all took care of each other, and they took care of her. She lived in a different apartment. They all lived in one apartment. You know, I think she had agoraphobia, and she didn't want to live inside the apartment. She wanted to live outside on the terrace, or she camped out on the beaches, and then she'd get arrested and go to another beach, you know. So, but they really looked after her, you know, they made sure she was okay. But yeah, I think their experience as kids made them feel that they really had to be there for one another, because who else would be there?
And just to sort of tighten the kaleidoscope a little bit more for the readers who haven't yet had the privilege of reading the almost legendary Morris sisters, with P.S. you guys got a really, really good review in the New York Times today, deservedly so, about this hat trick that Julie pulled off about, you know, thinking like the sisters were one thing and they were another, but really this is about a book everybody can relate to, about trying to figure out what is actually true about your family. But what were the things that you grew up believing, like the about each sister? Which one do you?
The things that I knew. Okay, so what I thought I knew, the oldest was Selma, and she, you know, I have pictures of her in my book. She was beautiful, a beautiful child. By the time I had ever got wind of her, she was a very old lady, and everybody talked about was she never stopped talking. She, you know, and they threw around the word batshit a lot. I don't know how to say that.
You can say batshit on the Blaze. We utterly own that word and quality. So drop the F-bomb. I'm from New Jersey. You do it, girl. Get it. Yeah.
So she was, that was her. She was never stopped talking. One of my relatives said that she was driving somewhere with another relative, and they actually threw her out of the car because she was so annoying, because she was talking so much. Then there was Marcella, who was the business one, and that I heard, like my Uncle Herbie, who I
Unky Hoib. It's like one of my favorite lines in the whole book. Is that you went to your Uncle Herbie to ask him questions, and he signs his letters Unky Hoib.
He does.
It's the best sign off for a letter ever, which is true.
So great. And he said, you know, he remembered Marcella at Sater's, like leaving the table and going upstairs to the black phone in the hallway and calling, you know, and doing her trading. So she, you know, she felt very like business like and aloof to me. Malvina had a physical disability. She limped, but everybody who talked about her said she was the kindest person in the world, the sweetest person in the world, really big smoker. And then Ruth, who was the playwright and the bohemian. So they were all very different. And, you know, there were certain elements of that, remained. There were personality traits that everybody told me about that I, had no way of disproving.
Mhm.
And I wasn't like trying to disprove anything. But some things happened to be disproved because when I found the information, I was like, this is not at all what I heard. But
Mhm. I feel as though they went from these very colorful, sort of larger than life legends to being real people who had a much more tragic, in some ways, that's not quite the right word. Pathos is the word that I was looking for. Like there are people who endured a lot of pathos and it bonded them, but I grew to know them much more as real people throughout the book, which I
Right.
think is a gift and also kind of a strange thing if you've been carrying the myth around in your head for a long time.
Oh, sure.
Right. So I have an ancestor on my mom's side who supposedly emigrated from Norway, went to Minnesota, went to the gold rush, found gold, lost it in a poker game, and then worked as a stevedore to go around the tip of South America to get back to Minnesota, where he fathered 11 children and never left the farm ever again and was very handsome. Like this was the whole story.
That's a great story.
It's a great story, but I haven't done the lock picking that you've done to disprove whether or not that is true. And so I wonder, and I think it was so brave of you to do this. Can you talk about going to Romania, which is one of my favorite parts of the book? Like not everybody actually goes to the country that their family of origin comes from to understand the genesis of their migration.
I think you will understand this as a writer. If you are writing a book about a lot of things that you find on the internet, it's going to be boring. I thought, like, what am I going to say? Like, I entered Marcella's name into the search engine and pressed search, and then this came up, and then I read it and went, oh my God. And then I had a glass of water, So I thought, if I don't go and there's, I don't know what the word I'm thinking the word cinematic. Like if when you watch a movie and things are shown to you, it's much more interesting than being just, told. And so that was what started it. Like I thought I got to have some scenery in this book. But then when I went to the places, I was like completely changed by them. It wasn't the intention. The intention was to make my book more interesting and fleshed out. I loved Romania. I'd never wanted to go there or, anything. And then I went and it smelled, the whole country smelled like my grandmother's house. It was like the colors. And I was thinking when these families came from these other places, what did they bring with them? They couldn't bring very much. They brought their recipes maybe, and their, the way that they, the traditions, a lot of things that are not tangible that they could bring. And that is like what I definitely felt about Romania, that the country just felt like Grandma Billy's house.
I love that. And you also wrote very movingly about the synagogues there as well.
Yeah,
and sort of the very dark history of Jews in Romania, Jews in Northern Europe. I'm half Jewish. So yes, I'm like, okay, we get this. Like not a happy place to be Jewish.
No. And I part of the thing the thing about Romania is that part of their story is that is the horrible pogroms and the Holocaust. And then, the next part of their story was the communism taking over, Ceausescu and the horrible, that aspect. So by the time I got there in 2016, it was like I had to go way back to people. And I did. I talked to very old men who had been there. I mean, I don't have the number in front of me, but there was something like, 80,000 Jews in Romania at the turn of the century. And now there's like 8.
It was even lower than, I remember reading this because I'm always shocked by this, but there was something like 30,000 Jews left out of like 800,000 Jews.
Right. And the towns that they came from, I went to the synagogues in those towns. They haven't been touched since the Morrises were there in the 1800s. Like it was like, paint chips falling off the ceiling and, freezing, and like it almost looked like they got up in the middle of a service and left because things are just left places. But, it's just very, very moving, or, it was very moving to me. So, and I was trying to, convey that.
You did. It was very evocative. I had felt this way. My first book was about Germany, and I went to Germany with my mom in '92. I promise this anecdote actually has a purpose. Okay, thank you. Sorry. So viewers, you thought you were going to hear from Julie, but no, I'm going to tell you this anecdote, but it has a meaning. So when we went, it was 1993, and I was in Eastern Germany. The Russians had just left, and nothing had been done to modernize the buildings after the war in many places. So we were in Weimar, Germany. They were still laying gas pipe into the town to have lights on in the streets. And the buildings still had bullet holes in them from the war. And in East Germany, some of the houses didn't even have walls. Like you could look into the apartments and they looked like looking into doll houses.
Right.
As somebody who was wanting to write historical fiction and as somebody who's trying to access history, I had this terrible longing to be able to just punch through my own temporal dimension and just access the people, because I was sure they were like right on the other side of this membrane of what I was literally seeing. And it created such a longing in me. And I felt that when I was reading the Morris sisters, when you talked about the synagogues and like trying to access history through the paint chips and the gravestones behind a factory that had been abandoned, and just like these tiny clues that you have to try to recreate a whole culture and time. And I actually got so swept up by this that and especially this line that you have that I think is so beautiful. As I sat there in Romania, while I knew I was ready to go back to my life, I felt a longing for a place that no longer existed. And I thought, yes, that is exactly the feeling, a place I've never been, but that I really wish I could visit. And I feel like I've lived there in some dream that I've been having my whole life. And I thought, I bet there's a German word for that, because the Germans have all the words. So I actually went into
Germans have words for all the unpleasant.
They have words for like, okay, but you're going to love this. Right. So I plugged that in. I was like, German word for a longing for a place you've never been before. And there is a term for it. And it is anemoia. It's Anemoia. Anemoia, nostalgia for a time you've never known. It's a term coined by the writer John Koenig for, wait for it, the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. That's incredible. That was a great anecdote.
Anemoia. Well, I mean, this is what your book inspired in me. And I bring this up, this long-winded, and I apologize for sort of bogarting the interview, but I think that most of us who are involved in being drawn to particular periods of history, whether it's a family background that we're trying to excavate or understand, or just something we feel called to experience this anemoia and this like longing to be in a place that we've never been. Do you feel that still lives with you? Can you ever overcome that after you put these facts to rest, or does it accompany you anyway?
I think that I kind of, one of the things that I sort of felt by the end of the book was that I had something I didn't have before, which was this understanding of them and what they went through, and also a lot of other relatives who were, who I didn't research in this book. A lot of my ancestors, whatever the family, I had this feeling that they were like, I was a part of this whole thing. And so they were, it was inside me without sounding like, a cuckoo Hallmark card,
Right.
But, that I, and I do plan to go back there again, just because it's there.
Right. But it feels as though, I mean, is there a sort of a closure in knowing what actually happened, or do you still have this yearning to kind of like claw back and
I didn't end up with all the answers to all the questions that I had. I don't think you can. And a friend of mine said something really smart, that that really any biography is a story of somebody, a person. It is this isn't the whole story of the Morris sisters. This is my story of the Morris sisters and what I found. And so, this isn't defining them, and other people, I imagine, I feel like once this is in the world a little bit, people who knew them or knew of them, I'm going to hear from them and they're going to say, oh, you got this totally wrong. She smoked a pipe or whatever, I don't know. But, or, just things that I couldn't find, and they will know them. And I'm kind of excited about that. And also like, sometimes you're like, it's too late. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, I hear that all the time about things I got wrong that I made up in my own head. And they're still wrong. You're like, okay.
Jenna, your head's wrong.
Right, exactly. I'm like, oh, did I imagine that wrong? I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to imagine it right the next time.
Oh, you know what you could have done? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'll try to like get that. Oh, and you also went to a medium. Speaking of like sort of psychic,
I did.
Like you went to a medium to try to find out. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then I have one more question, and then I'll take audience questions.
Okay. When I was starting, I felt like I had like a train case filled with questions, and absolutely no. The people in my family that knew about them, most of them were gone. This was in 2016. And I was like, I just need to talk to them. So I was talking to my friend, Patty Marks, who writes for the New Yorker, and she always knows weird things. And I said, I want a medium. And she said, oh, I know this person. She used this medium, and the medium actually, she wanted to make an appointment with the medium to get her husband who died, get in touch with her husband who died. And the medium got the husband, came in while they were making the appointment. And she's like, actually, he's here now. And it was like very specific directions of things to do, places, like no question about it being true. Mm-hmm. And I said, that is what I want. I want to ask them what their address was, where was this record, And so I called and, made an appointment with her, and she said, it's not a telephone. You can't just like pick them up the phone and there'll be, 4 of them will be there. And I was like, let's try. Let's really try.
Right.
I mean, it was, she said that, they're here. They don't want you to make a joke out of them. They don't want this to be like Grey Gardens. And I thought that actually, whether they were there or not, it made a lot of sense. Like, what would you want somebody who's writing your biography to know about you? No, don't make me look foolish. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, they were very sad that the Carnegie Deli had closed.
I love that. And you're like, I am too. Well, it was nice talking to you, sisters. That actually was kind of a tragedy that the Carnegie Deli closed. So we can discuss in the green room. We'll talk about like the favorite deli things. So speaking of writing memoir, it's time to memoir bond a little bit, and things that you get right or you get wrong. You would think with a memoir that you could get all the things right, and I'm sure I'm about to release a memoir in the fall, my first one, and I'm sure I'm going to be told I got all the things wrong, even though it was a memoir. But you are like
memories. Your memories can't be wrong.
Memories are very slippery.
Memory isn't a. It's not a. You're not writing a textbook. You're writing your memories. And I read this book, and it's amazing, and everyone's going to love this.
Thank you.
You got everything right.
Oh God, thank you. You're very you seem very emphatic about that. I'm really happy. Hi, Anissa. Thank you. We have so many people joining us today. Thank you. Yeah, we're excited about Woodrow. Yeah, I want to make the world ugly cry. That is my goal. But you are like the memoir queen. Like you specialize in memoir. And how was it different writing this memoir? You said you had started it and then you set it aside and thought, how will I research this? And then you went back to it. How is it different writing this memoir from your previous memoirs, and especially about the dogs?
Okay, so writing about I could write about dogs 24/7
forever, right?
I mean, I tell the stories of my dogs constantly to whoever will listen. I'm not, but and it's kind of like if you're a dog person, you get these things. It's like we have this shorthand, and that I think what people relate to is like, you talk like, oh, my dog, I sing this song to my dog, and everyone's like, oh, this song I sing to my dog, all that kind of. This was a tremendous amount of research that I had never done anything like that before, and I actually hope to continue writing books like this because I think I'm done with my own head. I mean, I don't have, I'm 54. I'm not 1,000. So I pretty much have written about everything, any people that would, would allow me to. And my child is turning 18 and no longer interested in my adorable spinning of stories. So
We are interested. And if you ever feel like returning to that and knocking out a few more dog memoirs, you have a very adoring dog audience here, including our producer, Trisha, who asked, did Julie and Jenna bond about writing dog memoirs? We just did just this moment. And also said that you had her at You Had Me at Woof. So you can do that.
You and I have talked about dog stuff for a long time, you know, through our communications. We've been bonding over dog things for like 10 years.
Yes, dogs are easy. I think this is interesting, and I'm going to get to our questions, which are numerous and fantastic, in one second. But I had a sort of a springboard question from this, which is so many people I know who are professional writers kind of switch their careers in midstream and just make a little bit of a genre jump, and sometimes go back to the original and sometimes not. Like I've been writing novels since I was 11, and wrote the dog book and thought, you know what? I just love this. I'll write dog books forever. And you've been writing the dog memoirs forever. And you're like, no, now I want to do more research intensive stuff. Do you think that that is a thing in your experience, that the pro writers think, I just really need to try a different channel for a while?
You know, I think, I mean, I wrote 2 dog books, which was, you know,
I know, like, Sarah, we love you.
I think that you know, I felt like after the second one that dogs taught me these lessons. Dogs continue to teach me lessons. How many lessons do you want to hear about learning? You know, me. Your lessons are different. Yeah, no, there are other people's lessons are. But you know, it's so I think there's a little bit of where I just thought, you know,
it's enough with the dog lesson.
And you do have to sort of like stretch yourself, or you know, what are you doing?
Right. I know. I would get very bored if I were writing the same thing all the time. I think there is like a certain easiness in writing the dog thing, because dogs are love, and it's good to write about things you love. And the dogs they're so much wiser than we are. But I think every once in a while people are saying, are you going to write another World War II novel? And I try. And it's like self-cannibalism, because I feel like, I already wrote about this emotional reaction to this other thing. And I so envy people who can get in the lane and stick in it and really enjoy it and just, you know, do that for the rest of their lives. But I have to reinvent the wheel every freaking time. So much work. God. Okay. So we have great audience questions. Also, we had a Sarah McCoy, another one, another dog mama comment from Sarah McCoy. Bozina. Okay. So Bozina hasn't read the book yet. Why Almost Legendary Morris Sisters?
You know, we had started talking about titles. This is much more to do with titles.
Yes.
And while I was writing it, I kept calling the book The Morris Sisters. And a friend of mine, the writer Meg Wolitzer, said, I forbid you to call that book The Morris Sisters. That's not a good title. And so I was saying, well, and then I was thinking about the Fabulous Baker Boys, and I thought, I wonder if I could do something like The Fabulous Morris Sisters. And then the reality was they were legendary, but everyone's legendary. And so I sort of thought it was more appropriate and a little funny to say almost legendary, you know, almost. And they are legendary. Here is a book about them, but you know, that's sort of how that came. That was Meg Walitzer's fault.
Oh, that's a really great anecdote. Well, I thank her because I think it's a great title. And Bozina, we were talking earlier about how Julie grew up thinking the sisters had done a certain set of things, and then it turned out that their lives were actually hi Margaret, that their lives were actually different, and that they survived even a lot more than she thought. So I thought that was what the title was hinting at. But like, thanks, Meg, that was great. Also, I would like to meet Meg someday just so I can fangirl on her. Audience question, was there any, oh my God, like she's like everything she writes, I'm like, Audience question, was there anything you discovered in your research that you were reluctant or afraid to put in your book? That is a really great question.
Very good question. No. There was nothing, I mean, you know, what the thing that I was just saying that about not making them look foolish. I think that there were things that, and somebody that interviewed me for something else said, you know, there were these things that you uncovered. Maybe they didn't want that to be told. And I said, there were a lot of things that were shameful to them that aren't anymore. Nobody thinks of, no decent people think mental illness is shameful, and so I think part of it is just looking at this from 2000, what year is it? 2009 million.
Whatever years it is, it's like 2008, 2000.
Yeah, between like 1910 and 2021. It's like, it's just, and I have always felt like if you love your people, you can only write about people you love. I mean, memoir, or I can, because I don't want, the bad, there's nothing to say. And I felt like as I wrote this, I had more and more love for them. And I felt like, giving this to them, telling these stories was, for them too. Like, look, it's okay. Here we all are. It's okay.
It's written with great compassion. I had great experience and great privilege of interviewing Cheryl Strayed last summer for Blaze, and we talked a little bit about memoir. And even if you're writing sort of biography and memoir, which is what you were doing, and excavation and memoir, her whole thing was in response to an audience question about, like, how do you write about somebody who has done you wrong or done something really awful? Like, how do you tell the truth about that? And she said, you have to accept consequences, which for you is not a problem because these people are gone. And for me, I wrote about a dog. So what is he going to do? And he's also gone. Right. So that's easy. But she also said, examine the motive. If you're writing for revenge, that's not good. Like, you have to write out of love in some way. And I felt as though the Morris sisters started with one set of concepts about who people were and twisted the kaleidoscope until you could see them as actual people, and that your love for the actual people and your compassion and your wanting to sort of, you're yearning toward them and wanting them to be okay grew throughout the book in this sort of orchestral way, which was super lovely. I think we have time for one more question. If you're done with your own hay, quote unquote, no. What will you work on next? I want another book. That's a good question. What is coming next?
Oh, I am now working on a proposal for it's like I haven't quite figured out how it's going to work, but my grandfather was in the Hebrew Orphan Asylum in Brooklyn when he was a kid, and there isn't a lot written about that. And so I've started writing something with that. And my dad has like is starting to have some memory issues, and talking about this with him has been really powerful. Like, he remembers stuff, and so it's been like a kind of neat thing just having this to talk to him about, and he's really into doing this. So I think that and this whole story, I'm still trying to get the proposal together, but that's what it's going to be. The Hebrew Orphan Asylum, the friends that my grandfather had, what happened when they were there, really interesting. I started looking at articles online about from the time of the Hebrew Orphan Asylum and the things, and it's, again, I'm all like, oh my God, this is incredible, meals they had and stuff. So,
yes.
I could write a book about meals that people had through eternity. I'm fascinated with it.
Okay, that also is a great book. I was just thinking that what you're describing and what you described about the Morris sisters and what you just described about the stories your dad is telling about your grandfather in the Hebrew orphanage are the stories that I love, because people are taking flashlights and poking them into corners that are otherwise unknown. But once the things that are in those corners are revealed, they're really fascinating. And the meals also, to me, would be fascinating. Food. So
it's disappointing to see what people ate in the 1910s and 20s. Like, you look at these great restaurants, and dessert is like canned peaches.
Or like aspic. Everything is like aspic, like slippery Jello.
Or a boiled potato, and like boiled meat and boiled potato. It's just so,
absolutely. Oh my gosh. I have in my house in rural Minnesota, I have a book of recipes from 1911 that was supposed to be very au courant, and it was all things like, peaches and aspic and strange like hooves and jellified meat.
The part of meat no one wants to eat.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And they would like build it into some sort of edifice and eat it, like with lettuce buttresses, and then there were oysters, and you're just like, whoa. I had this great interview also with Kate Christensen, and we bonded about food. We were supposed to talk about her book, and we didn't talk about the book at all, and we just ended up talking about food for 60 minutes. I think you and I and Kate should all get together and recreate a 1911 dinner party that's actually edible.
Yes.
Right.
And then after we'll go to KFC and eat
actual food.
Right. I visited Kate in she lives in Portland, Maine, and we went for the best lobster rolls I ever had in my life.
So good. Yeah, because they just been like called from the ocean and hit on the head, and then they put them in a roll.
And a little mayonnaise.
With mayonnaise. Yes. Yes. Mayonnaise. So can you write like the legendary mayonnaise sisters? Yes. Next, that would be like me, you, and Kate, and then Meg Wolitzer, who will be like, I don't know you people.
Right. Meg will
mayonnaise.
Meg will come up with a good title.
That wasn't a good title. Fine. Okay.
Oh, no, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Mayonnaise Sisters. Okay, so I have maybe just a backup band instead. I have one comment that I would love to read, because I think another thing that books like yours do act as sort of lightning rods for other people's experiences with their families. And this is a friend of mine, a dear friend, who is a librarian, although she's now retired, but a librarian on the Oklahoma Panhandle in the town of Guyman. Her name is Rachel Sides, and she's here with us today. So Rachel said, as a child, my father randomly commented on the plot line in the episode of Wagon Train that his multiple great-grandmother had been kidnapped by Indians. As an adult, I found that the early founders of Indiana, William and John Connor's mother, had been kidnapped as a child. I had not been able to make the connection to John, but I believe he is my ancestor. So I think this is so interesting, the way you have these, like, sort of, again, the filaments just filter down through history and land on you and contribute to these beliefs. What advice do you have for people like Rachel, or people who are investigating their family past, or just, sort of trying to grasp at these ideas that float around? Like, what advice would you give them for investigating their own histories?
I think that, I think you get a subscription to Ancestry, because they have the largest amount of digitized records anywhere. But also, if you talk to people, there are the genealogists and librarians and archivists. They're very knowledgeable. You go to the towns and the places if you want to, but start online, because, it's much easier to get, really concrete stuff. And then you go, one of the things, like the town, and some of these towns have original files. And, I when I was in, I went to the cemetery in St. Louis. They had the files of the Moore sisters' parents' graves, and like Xeroxes of the letters they sent in 1930, and the bill, and everything like that. And it was like, it's just right there. And so it's fun to do. You sort of talk to people in your family, look online, talk to as many people that are still able to remember things as you can, because they won't be around forever. And then, really just knocking around on the internet. And it was very hard for me, because Morris is a very common name. If I had been researching Klam, it would have been a lot easier. But
yes. Yes, it's true. And speaking of which, I'm going to let you go in one moment, because believe it or not, we've kept you almost an hour, like fastest hour of my life.
Me too.
I know, you're like, well, let's sit here and talk more about mayonnaise. But I wanted to ask you what events you're doing, because I know you're doing an event with your brother, Matthew Klam, who is also a writer and novelist whose work I've loved, and short stories in the New Yorker, which I loved, right? So you guys have your own lanes. There's memoir and there's novelist. Can you tell us a little bit about your events for the almost legendary Moore sisters? So
I have one tonight online. You can go to my website to get the links to things. And it's with Books and Books, Politics and Prose, and Harvard Bookstore are all sponsoring that.
Yay.
Then on Monday, I'm doing something with the St. Louis Historical Society, and that is with a Novel Neighbor bookstore. And I'm actually being interviewed by somebody from the St. Louis Historical Society about the book. And then I have a thing with Jen Mendelsohn, who's Resistance Genealogy. She's going to interview me next Wednesday for the Center for Jewish History in New York. And that should be great. She's unbelievable. I learned so much from her. And, you know, I'm going to be doing other like Instagram lives, and I have an event in Southampton in person if, like, you know, the Delta doesn't come down on us. But
stay away, Delta. Everybody wear your masks. Wear your masks out there. Yeah, good. Okay, I'm glad you're mixing it up. So you guys, if you want a more complete picture of the legendary Morris sisters.
And I'm going to wear something different tonight when I do that.
Oh, yeah, I know. At least from the waist up.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you do live events, you have to wear pants. It's such a drag.
I know. And shoes.
You know, shoes. I don't wear, pants that's as far as I'm going to go for live events. People, you heard it here first. You know, I did have one last thing come to me while we were talking. If you could, like, have a dinner party with Aspic or not, with the Morris sisters, what would you say to them?
I would ask them the questions that I never got answered, and I would ask them how they felt about the things that happened to them. You know, I found these things like, how did you feel? I mean, one of the sisters was pulled out of the orphanage with her sisters because she had to go to the Cripples Home orphanage. She was 8 years old, and then she was in a hospital by herself for months away from her sisters. Like, how did you all feel? And how did you, you know, that's what I really want to know, because, you know, the facts there are some facts that I would really like to know what the heck happened and why I can't find it. But that's the thing, I think, mostly.
Yeah. It's the thing that history doesn't really easily fill in. And you would probably ask them to stop smoking, you know, all around you, like 5
years. You know, they smoked, but they lived to be like 97. They ate like, you know, raw red hamburgers and French fries, and they all live to be really old. So maybe I should start smoking.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe this is what I'm doing wrong. Well, I'm going to go get a pack of cigarettes now and grind them out in like a big thing of red meat. So y'all got to go. Guys, buy at least 5 copies of the Almost Legendary Morris Sisters for everybody you know who is interested in genealogy, everybody you know is interested in uncovering like who your family really is, and just a really dang good, maybe it was the Aspic, you're right. It probably like coated their lungs and veins so much that they lasted. But there's not a lot of Aspic in the book, so if you're Aspic phobic, don't worry. You will love the book. So please go get it. Fantastic. Read the review in the Times. Don't forget to come back to the fabulous Blaze for our upcoming authors, because, you know, we'll always give you a treat. Like Julie, thank you so much for being with us today.
For having me.
Absolutely. We love it. It's our privilege, and have a great time on your tour.
Yes. My tour from my living room.
No pants. Bye, everybody. Bye.